Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. Let's get this over with, shall we? I'm kidding. Welcome in. Appreciate you listening, whether it's on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. Not a veritable cornucopia of sports topics because we have one. You know what it is. Give me your thoughts. 719-247-1313. You can call or text into the show. And let's get going, shall we? The refrain coming from specifically Garrett Bowles in the Broncos locker room yesterday after their 22-19 win over the Chiefs was, what are they going to say about us now? Allow me to be one who answers that question. I am going to say that the way that the Broncos win games is ugly. I am going to say that it puts their fan base through torture for pretty much 3 quarters every Sunday. But I will also say that it is incredibly effective. It's repeatable. And now that they have won this way against both teams that played in the Super Bowl last year, they can truly do this to anyone in the National Football League. The paradigm surrounding this Broncos team has shifted. I said going into the Chiefs game, and I still believe this, a team that forces the Denver Broncos to play specifically offensively well for 4 quarters will beat the Denver Broncos. And I thought Kansas City was that team. But after yesterday, the question has to be rephrased because I still believe that's what it is. Okay, what the Denver Broncos were yesterday is not that much different than what they have been the 7 previous weeks. But what you have to ask now is whether there is a team in the NFL that can make them play offensively for 4 quarters. We're running out of teams. They may exist, and we can get into this conversation. Maybe they're all on the NFC side. If you go by the general feeling, despite what their record said they were, the Kansas City Chiefs were the team to beat. They were the favorite to get out of the AFC. The Chiefs are back. All of that kind of stuff had been going on the last few weeks. And they were coming off of a bye, which Andy Reid rarely, if ever, loses coming out of a bye. They were far more healthy than the Denver Broncos were, and yet the Broncos made the Kansas City Chiefs play that kind of a game yesterday. And in that kind of a game, the Broncos win. The Chiefs could not put them away in the first 3 quarters. And Sean Payton said it to Tracy Wolfson on the CBS broadcast coming out of halftime. And I got to say, as a Chiefs fan, it made my blood boil a little bit. Where he said they're a first half team, and he felt good about things. The arrogance on him, right? He was right. He was right. Going back to the Buffalo Bills game, where it seemed so out of place, so ridiculous for a head coach to sit there after they just got their butts kicked to say, well, if we would have won this one, we felt good about the next team that we would have played, which was Kansas City. The unmitigated gall of this guy to sit up there after a, 41-7 loss and be that defiant, Sean Payton was right. He has found a formula. And it's not the way that I would like my football team to play. And when you compare it to the way, I mean, look at the way that the Nuggets and the Avalanche play. That's what I like to see from my teams. I don't like this, what the Denver Broncos do. But they keep doing it over and over and over again to everybody that is on their schedule, good, bad, or indifferent. And they win, and they keep winning. And now they have a stranglehold over the AFC West, I should say. The AFC, the top seed, is squarely within their reach. Sean Payton was right. He called his shot. And the symmetry of Will Lutz hitting that field goal, the symmetry of the Broncos blocking a kick against the Kansas City Chiefs, that shows how far this team has come. Because here's going to be a popular sentiment from people. Well, the Broncos, I always believe they've always been doing this. Yeah, but that's what makes you a fanboy. That's what makes you a fan, is that you're just saying that they can do this against anybody without actual evidence that they can. That's why yesterday was so big. That's why it was nonsense. Anyone that brought up last week how this game doesn't matter to the Denver Broncos, look at the way the Broncos reacted to that win and tell me they had nothing on the line. They needed this win to prove what I am saying. Games against Dallas and Vegas and Houston, they weren't going to cut it. Now, to be fair to the Broncos, and I gave them their flowers when they beat Philadelphia. And I said after they beat Philadelphia, you have to start to ask the question, can they do this against everyone? And here was another opportunity against Kansas City, and things have changed. Broncos were missing Surtain and Dobbins and Singleton. The Chiefs were rolling. They had everybody, including their Jawan Taylor and Josh Simmons, back. And the Broncos still beat them. Perception about this team, whatever was coming out of the Philadelphia game, it kind of waned a little bit. Because the expectation after the Philadelphia game is, okay, they've learned their lesson. Now they're going to come out and beat teams over 4 quarters and not just in the fourth quarter. The Broncos offense, I should be specific. Because the reason why the Broncos offense doesn't really need to get going until the fourth quarter is because that defense plays 4 quarters. Yesterday, the special teams played 4 quarters. Offense still had their struggles. But the thought was, after the Philly game, as great of a win as that was, the expectation was then, oh, well, now the Broncos, having beaten Philadelphia, now when they play these weak teams like Houston, like Dallas, although Dallas was a little bit different offensively. Vegas, great example, the game right before Kansas City. Oh, they'll just blow those teams out. Or they'll win decisively. Blowouts don't happen a ton in the NFL. But the thought was, oh, again, if they can beat Philadelphia, well, they can have no problem with Vegas. They have no problem with Houston. No. Because this is the formula that Sean Payton has figured out. And in many ways, I know that the Chiefs have an elite defense. Their defense isn't as good as Denver, but they're an elite defense. But they do seem to be offensively kind of the antithesis of the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Or at least in perception. Right? But isn't that how you got to beat a team like Kansas City? You know, John Elway for years tried to replicate what the Chiefs did. Right? Drafted Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and tried to build what Kansas City had. Because it's a copycat league. What Sean Payton has done, not to say it's totally different than Kansas City, because again, Kansas City is a good defense. They're well coached. They prepare. But the Broncos aren't going to blow out teams like Kansas City have been doing. Not really. Right? Cincinnati being maybe the one outlier. But Sean Payton says in a division with Kansas City, this is what I'm going to have my team be. And it's not a carbon copy of Kansas City. But it's going to be a team that can beat Kansas City. If we do what we need to do, and if we execute at a high level, we can beat Kansas City. That's what he's been saying all along. Now, I would argue that the timing of his comments haven't been the best. But that's what he's been saying. A team that is led by their defense, which Kansas City is not known for being. A team that will grind it out, a team that won't look pretty at times. But if they execute, and they executed at a much higher level than the Kansas City Chiefs did, they're going to win. They have a style that can beat Kansas City. You have to beat this team in the first three quarters. You have to take control of the game. That was the exact scouting report going into Sunday. Kansas City knew it. You knew it. I knew it. Kansas City couldn't do it. They could not do it. And again, the question becomes, can anybody? What are you going to say about the Broncos now? That's our question of the day. 719-247-1313. I will pose that question to Corey Roldan of KKTV next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. My guest today was in the house as the Broncos beat the Chiefs 22-19. He even correctly predicted that the game was going to end on a Will Lutz field goal. Although, to be fair, Corey Roldan of KKTV, don't they all these days?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every, 1 out of 2 games, because he had one against the Titans, and then 2 weeks before that, he had one against the Giants. So it seems like every 2 weeks we get a Will Lutz game winner. But isn't it a great day here in Colorado? I mean, it's just a great day. The Broncos are 9-2, first place in the AFC. You got the Nuggets 10-2, second place in the West, and then you got the Avs, who are just better than every team by a significant margin in the NHL.
Yeah, and I think there was prior to that, and I know you're needling me, and I'm not going for it. I'm not going to do it. But wasn't there kind of a feeling before yesterday, because of the way the Broncos were winning, that it was, yeah, the Nuggets and the Avalanche and the Broncos are winning too, which people around here very much like, but it felt different. Now, isn't it more of maybe it's not as pretty as those other two teams, but I guess I'll use the word legitimize. Does yesterday legitimize what the Broncos have been doing?
Well, that's the whole topic that we've been discussing with the Broncos. Even in the locker room, there is no legitimate wins in the NFL. They're all really, really difficult. This is a Broncos team that now have beaten the Chiefs and the Eagles, 2 teams that played in the Super Bowl last year. And talking to the team in the locker room after the win, Jonathan Cooper straight up looked at me and said, "Who we scared of? Who are we scared of?" They're not scared of anybody. It might not be pretty. Nikola Jokic, it's pretty watching the Denver Nuggets right now. It's pretty watching the Colorado Avalanche. But you know what? The Broncos find ways to win, and that's what a good football team does, and have a championship DNA. And to your point, walking into yesterday, really in the fourth quarter, when it was 19-16, you just kind of felt like, hey, this is Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs. They're going to find a way to win again against the Broncos. They're desperate. They need this game to stay in the division race and to be in the playoffs. But the Broncos, on the other hand, Bo Nix outplayed Patrick Mahomes there at the end of the game in the fourth quarter. And really, I mean, they won it. They won it. You really can't say anything or really can't complain when you're 9-2 on an 8-game winning streak.
What was the moment? Because you mentioned how much the Chiefs had riding on the game and who their quarterback is. At what point did you say to yourself, the Broncos are going to win this game?
So in that fourth quarter, it was just kind of like they kept giving the Chiefs opportunities. The Broncos punted a couple times, were kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. So you constantly in that fourth quarter, in the back of your head, you're thinking, okay, Mahomes is going to put together a drive. Like, they hit Kelsey a couple times, and they're going to win this game. My exact point where I thought I knew the Broncos were going to win the football game, not the first Cortland Sutton pass that was a 20-yard gain to the Denver 41, but it was the second third down pass. It was 3rd and 5, and they put the Broncos into the Chiefs territory, and they had to do a virtual measurement, right? And you're sitting there, and you're like, man, they don't get this. And if it's 4 foot inches, does Sean Payton go for it here? All right, but they do get it. The Chiefs have to call a timeout there, and it sets up first and 10 inside the Chiefs territory. That's when I felt like, okay, the Broncos are in full control here. They just need to get about 15 more yards, and they can win the game. Peyton was aggressive, which was awesome to see too. They had that pass to Troy Franklin after Franklin dropped some pretty balls from Bo Nix in that game. He catches that one, what really mattered, for a 32-yard gain to get the Broncos into the 15-yard line of the Chiefs. And Will Lutz, 5 for 5. I'm not going to say it on here, but Will Lutz has a nickname, and he kind of proved the nickname right, and the Broncos won.
So I think, and you and I talked about this, now you have to ask the question, because I think you and I were of like mind that, look, these teams, if they can make the Broncos offense, because the defense, we have to give credit to the defense. They play 4 quarters every single week. And when we talk about the Broncos not performing for 4 quarters, we're really talking about the offense.
And
but is there a team now? You mentioned Philadelphia. They beat them this way. They beat Kansas City this way. How many teams in the NFL do you think can force the Denver Broncos offense to put up points for 4 quarters?
Buffalo.
Okay.
Just because you got Josh Allen, and they're going to find ways to score, I think, and it's going to force the Broncos to be able to match, which the Bills' defense isn't great. So that's one. I think they should have beaten the Colts. They had that fluky leveraging call, so I don't think it's the Colts. I don't think it's the Chargers, although the Chargers have had success against the Broncos.
They're a different team now, though, Corey. We have to say with the injuries.
Because of Joe Alton, the tackle. They got Trevor Penning, who's a traffic cone at tackle. I should know that. I know Trevor Penning. That is a brutal tackle to have. The Patriots, I need to see more of the Patriots. They're going to have the Bills, the Ravens, back-to-back weeks in December. I'm kind of curious to see what the New England Patriots look like. Strickbay's been great. They have gotten a quarterback coach right again, and they're going to have success for a long time again in New England, which don't know how you feel about that. But the Bills, the Ravens, baby. If they could get Lamar rolling again, it's been a couple of weeks since September that Lamar has looked like Lamar. In the NFC, definitely the Rams and the Lions.
It's not many, and half the ones you just mentioned would face the Broncos in a potential Super Bowl.
Yeah, you're right. Buffalo is the one in the NFC AFC where I'm like, okay, matchup wise, that would be a bad matchup for the Broncos. And we saw that during the playoffs. But, that's also Josh Allen just being Josh Allen.
Does this team need the 1 seed?
Need it? No.
Need it.
Would it help greatly giving you more rest? You only have to win 2 games compared to 3. In the NFL, that's huge. Huge. I don't think they need it. They're on an 8-game winning streak right now. They could go on streaks and make the Super Bowl without being the 1 seed, but greatly boost your odds greatly, I think. Yeah.
And I'm talking more about making the road to the Super Bowl go through Denver more than the bye. Yes. I'm just saying, if they have to go into, I don't know what it would be, going into New England or going into Indianapolis at some point during the playoffs, how important against maybe those teams, because that's who the conversation is around right now. Do you think it's necessary for the Broncos to have those teams in Denver?
Well, I think it would be great because you've won 11 straight games now out in Power Field. Hearing that crowd on Sunday, Ryan, I've been covering this team now for this the 3rd season. I've been covering this team, and that's the loudest I've heard that stadium. And it wasn't just in the 4th quarter. It was from play 1 all the way through. The crowd was great. The Broncos have a true home field advantage right now. They're undefeated this year at home. So, yes, to your point, yes, it would. They need that, but do I think that they can't go win on the road in Indianapolis or in New England? I think they could.
So then let's look at this. You don't want to, mathematically, they haven't won anything yet. They haven't clinched a playoff spot, haven't won the AFC West, but let's give them their proper due for winning that game and everything we put into that game. What beyond, clinching the AFC West, which feels like a formality at this point, what do you need to see to buy into the maximum amount you can into this Broncos team over these last handful of weeks coming out of the bye?
I want to see Bo Nix start playing like he did in the fourth quarter, but I want to see Bo Nix letting it loose, ripping some passes like he played against the Cincinnati Bengals, like he played against a couple of teams last year in
Dallas.
December. Yes, just confidence. And he looked like he played confidence. Dude, talking to the Broncos in the locker room, everybody's having that video with Adam Troutman with the, what do you call it? I asked him that question. That was my question.
Oh,
To
you are. Well, then let me, and not to interrupt, but let me ask. Don't you think it's a little bit much? This, the leave Bo alone stuff.
I mean, you got to. It's fair to criticize NFL players, and it's
Right.
fair to criticize Bo Nix struggling. But I will say, his teammates, Mike McGlinchey is a professional, really good interviewer in the locker room. McGlinchey says he handled it like a champ. He knew he needed to get better, and he went to work this past week. And you saw that on Sunday. He was making the right throws, even when he missed. A lot of times Troy Franklin had a drop on the first drive that was one of Bo Nix's best passes. Another drop before that. A lot of the misses were actually not on Bo Nix. Previous weeks, we criticized him for not seeing the field and see it versus the Raiders. But he saw it versus the Chiefs, and he was confident. And you know who I told you this last week? I want to continue seeing more and more Pat Bryant because I think Pat Bryant can be a stud. And Bo Nix is only going to get more confident in Pat. You got Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims really wasn't involved. Besides punt returns. Incredible.
Right. Offensively, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Incredible. 101 yards of punt return yardage. But Bo played well, and he handled the criticism right.
Absolutely. Thanks for this. I'll see you in a little bit, I suppose, over in on
man,
your
we're gonna have a little chat. There might be a video of me predicting correctly. Hey, dude, last year Broncos predicted win 5 games. I predicted them to make the playoffs. This year, I predicted the Broncos to win the division. So I'm on a little hot streak right now.
Okay. Can you give me the winning lottery numbers for tonight?
Oh, dude, I want the winning lottery numbers.
You are a seer of futures, my friend, and you do a great job on KKTV 11. Corey Roldan, appreciate the time, bud.
I appreciate you, Ryan.
Yep. We'll see ya. That is Corey Roldan. Knew it. He knew it. He called it last week. Didn't get the score exactly right, but who gets the scores exactly right? He did say that the Broncos would walk off with the Will Lutz field goal. Did you see the video, by the way, before I take a break here, that Sean Payton was celebrating before Will Lutz kicked it? So we've gone from, Sean Payton walking out on the field and kind of jokingly like yelling at Will Lutz to kick it right through. And now we've gone into Sean Payton doesn't even celebrate when the kick goes through because he's already raised his hands just by sending Will Lutz onto the field. I mean, the confidence of Sean Payton, it's not for everybody. I got to say that at times it bothers me. I'll just admit it for a team that hasn't accomplished really anything. And I know to use Sean Payton's own words, that's not his hump, right? The sins of Vance Joseph, the sins of Nathaniel Hackett, that's not on him. I get that. But like for a team that has been down as long as the Broncos have, not the way that Sean Payton is, it rubs people the wrong way. But man, isn't it a part of this team's identity? I think it is. I think the bravado of Sean Payton is ingrained in this team. Now, it doesn't manifest itself in the same way. You don't hear Bo Nix, talking the same way Sean Payton does, or really anyone on the Denver Broncos. They're more humble than their head coaches. I'll say that. But it is confidence. Right. And it's how that confidence manifests itself. For Sean Payton, it's bravado. That's a little irritating at times. But for the Denver Broncos, it's just confidence. Right? And Bo Nix said it. I'll play some of Bo Nix's audio coming up in a little bit, as well as Sean Payton's. But this is a confident group, a defiant at times, given the narrative around this team. But yeah, it was a big win, and you saw it. It meant the idea that the Broncos had nothing to lose in that game is nonsense. They had a ton to gain. It just wasn't in the standings where they had a ton to gain. 719-247-1313. So you've heard what I'm going to say about the Broncos now. You heard what Corey's saying about the Broncos now. What are you saying about the Broncos now? 719-247-1313. Air Force football at home Saturday afternoon, taking on the New Mexico Lobos, one of the upstart teams in America right now. What a job Jason Eck has done with the Lobos. If you would like to be at Falcon Stadium on Saturday to check that one out, last chance for you to see the Falcons live and in person, unless you're going to drive to Fort Collins next week. You can text Falcons in your name to 719-247-1313, and I'll give the 13th texter who does that 4 tickets to see Air Force hosting New Mexico on Saturday. That is a 5 p.m. kickoff, if that does anything for you one way or another. More of your thoughts on the Denver Broncos. This coming in from, let's see. This coming in from Aaron. How about them Broncos, Ryan? Yes, we win ugly, but in the end, it's winning ball games that counts. Got to give credit where credit is due, my friend. Go Broncos. And I have, and I will continue to do so. I'm at the question is, what are we going to say about the Broncos now? What do you say about the Broncos now? Well, good or bad. You don't have to be someone who doubted the Broncos to weigh in today. What does this do for you if you were confident? And that's why I asked the question to Corey Roldan of KKTV, because he picked the Broncos to win the division. He's been high on this team. Still want to know the answer to the question. Because I don't know, no matter what angle you come at this from, no matter where you are, if you think that the Broncos were completely fraudulent, if you thought they were a pretty good team, if you thought they were an elite team, I think yesterday has to change your perspective a little bit. A little bit, right? And the question of, I know the blueprint to beat the Broncos, there's a blueprint to beat every team in the NFL. Last time I checked, no one is unbeaten. The blueprint to beat the Denver Broncos, you got to make Bo Nix in the offense move the ball for 4 quarters. You got to get him in a shootout. To put it simply, it's what you have to do. How many teams are equipped to do that? How many teams do you have the utmost faith? Or faith is a weird word to use unless you're a fan of that other team. But how many teams in the NFL, if not that Kansas City team, how many can you truly say can get the Broncos out of their comfort zone and force Bo Nix to play like an elite quarterback for 4 quarters against the Broncos defense, who, by the way, is going to get Pat Surtain back, reportedly, after they come out of the bye week. I mean, LA, the Rams, I think you have to think that they might be one of those teams. My feeling on Green Bay going into the season that they would be one of those teams, but every time I watch the Packers, they disappoint me. They needed Jameis Winston to go Jameis Winston in order to beat the Giants. Even Baltimore and Buffalo. Even Baltimore and Buffalo. Are they both truly teams that you have the utmost confidence that they can make the Broncos play a 4-quarter game? And from the Broncos' perspective, let's say Baltimore is one of those. How much fear does the Ravens defense put in your heart if you're a Broncos fan? Like maybe they can play a 4-quarter game against Baltimore. But that's the recipe to beat them. And I thought Kansas City had that recipe. Every sign was pointing to Kansas City winning that game. Kansas City got their guys back. They were coming off of a bye week. They had been rolling the weeks leading into the bye week. Even as that game unfolded, you saw what Chris Jones was doing. It's like, well, they're getting Chris Jones back now. I thought the Kansas City Chiefs were able to execute that blueprint. Nope. They played quite poor. And before, nobody's saying this, but I'll just launch a preemptive strike here. All the penalties on the Chiefs offense, can you attribute some of those to their worry about the Broncos pass rush? False starts, holding calls. One thing that I am really glad about, regardless of the result, and as a fan, I don't love the result, but I like the guy that's on the air right before me every day. I'm team content. It's a great story, the Denver Broncos beating the Kansas City Chiefs. But one thing that I think we can all agree on, glad we don't need to have a officiating discussion, do we? We're good here? Now, it wasn't going that way, and maybe because the Broncos ended up winning, that's why there's less conversation about the officials, if we're being fair. But I didn't love all the penalties. I thought at times they should let them play, but there was certainly no slant towards one team or another. I thought the referees imposed themselves a little bit too much in the game at times, but I think they did that for both teams. I'm just glad we don't have to I don't have to talk about officiating. Yeah, there were some calls that were questionable. Okay, both teams had plenty of opportunities to rectify that, to overcome that. And that's what I always say in these games where people want to complain about officiating. You have an entire game, unless it's on the very last play and it's a completely egregious call. And even then, you have the entirety of the game before that to not put yourself in that position. So I'm never one to say an official decides a game. Never that way. But we don't have to have that conversation, do we? We're good here. But a lot of the Chiefs' penalties, I looked at it and I said they were worried about Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper. I asked Corey Roldan the question of when he knew that the Broncos were going to win that game. I'll tell you when I knew. It was the 3rd and 15 throw to Courtland Sutton. That's when I knew. And I get it, like the past history with Lutz getting kicks blocked and stuff. I understand if you were like, yeah, it wasn't until Lutz's kick went through the uprights. And that's fine. But I'm saying I got this sense that the Broncos were going to win the game when Bo Nix hit Courtland Sutton on the 3rd and 15. And according to Chris Jones, the reason why the Broncos executed that play, they knew what was coming.
I heard them calling it out. They actually switched the line. If you watch the film, you can see Bo Nix kind of switched the line. So they knew it. We got to do a better job of disguising.
They read it. They read the Chiefs like a book and knew exactly what to expect, and they were able to adjust and have that massive completion to Courtland Sutton. And that was one of the keys I mentioned last week. The idea that Courtland Sutton's, or not the idea, it was proof. It actually was happening that Courtland Sutton's targets each game were going down. That's not okay. That's your best receiver. You can't let his targets go down like the Broncos had been over the past few weeks. You got to figure out a way to get that guy the football. And they did on Sunday. Cortland was incredibly vital to their success. But whether it was Cortland Sutton or anybody on the Broncos could have caught that ball from Bo Nix. That play was wide open, and Bo Nix delivered it right where it needed to be. But the reemergence of Cortland Sutton in a Sunday conversation about the Denver Broncos, that hadn't been going on the last few weeks, despite the Broncos still winning, and credit to them for finding other ways to win. But they weren't going to beat Kansas City without Cortland Sutton. And arguably the biggest play of the game, the play where I kind of slouched in my chair and I was like, uh-oh, was that 3rd and 15 completion from Bo Nix to Cortland Sutton. But I wouldn't blame you if you're like, when Will Lutz made the field goal and then there was like a brief pause making sure there was no flags on the play. I wouldn't blame you if that's the moment you knew that the Broncos were winning that game. But I got that sense came over me when they converted that around the 2-minute warning. I'm like, yeah, they're going to win this game. Wasn't that much different from Bo Nix, I would say, throughout the game. But I would be lying if I said that I thought that Bo Nix would even play that well in the fourth quarter against Steve Spagnuolo, against Chris Jones in this Chiefs defense. So even though but that's kind of Bo Nix and his performance is kind of emblematic is kind of a microcosm of the entire idea I'm putting out here today. Yeah, I know the Broncos have been doing it this way. I know Bo Nix has been performing well in the fourth quarter. I just didn't think they would be able to do it against Kansas City. And they did. And now the question is, who can't they do it against? This is Jason from the 719. This team has pure determination and true grit. I honestly do believe that the Broncos are a brotherhood and everybody plays for everybody, which makes this team extremely dangerous. And I think that's a great point. And Sean Payton spoke to that idea, Jason, and I will get to that right after the top of the hour, so hang tight because Sean Payton will prove your point. This Donnie says, don't look now, but the Ravens are 500 and moving up, as I expected them to be. As I expected. I said it when Lamar was cleared. I'm like, look at their schedule. Getting Lamar Jackson back, the Ravens are going to make a run. And that's why a couple weeks ago, I thought that before that, I thought that the Steelers squandered a perfect opportunity to essentially do what the Broncos did yesterday. Take kind of a stranglehold on the division. But still, okay, do you think Lamar can be at the height of his powers against this Broncos defense for 4 quarters to then force the Broncos offense to match them? And then the next question is the way that the Ravens defense has played this season. Is there a lot of confidence that they'll actually be able to hold down the Broncos offense for 4 quarters, or is it more like the Dallas game? I think I would say a maybe on Baltimore. I think Buffalo responded in a big way after that absolute embarrassment against the Miami Dolphins. So I'll say yes to them. I'll say the Rams are definitely one of those teams. How many more are they? And look, this doesn't mean that the Denver Broncos are going to win every game from here on out. They'll drop one. I'll call it right now that the Denver Broncos will lose a football game between now and the end of the season. But now, like you look at the Commanders game, for instance. I think what the Broncos have now earned is that if they do lose one of these games after the bye week, which again, they will, it doesn't need to devolve into they're fraudulent. They can't keep doing this. Like, they need to be granted the same leniency that we grant to other really good football teams, which is everybody has an off week. The Rams have had off weeks. Kansas City certainly has. Buffalo just did against Miami. It doesn't excuse the loss. It doesn't mean it's not a bad loss, but it's not going to come crashing down around the Denver Broncos if they drop one of these between now and the end of the season. We'll see how it looks to lay blame where it needs to be laid. But they have earned the right or earned the leniency to say, even if they drop one of these games from here on out, it doesn't mean that it's happening, everything's coming crashing down. 719-24-7-1313. What does Sean Payton have to say about his team? You'll hear that next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Monday. Appreciate you watching the show, as many of you are on our social media platforms, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. The handle is the same in all of those places at XTRA Sports 1300. One more game left in where are we at? Week 11. Dallas and Vegas tonight. Our coverage of Monday Night Football begins less than 1 hour from now. So all the more reason to get your thoughts in on this Monday after the Broncos beat the Chiefs 22-19 at 719-247-1313. Let's hear a little bit from the Broncos. I found this very interesting. Actually, because we got the text in about the brotherhood that the Broncos are, how tight-knit they are, how much they believe in one another. Here was Sean Payton talking about that and their ability to go out when almost everybody was saying that this is where they get exposed and Kansas City beats them again, why they were able to put their head down and go out and beat Kansas City.
But it's finding those guys that can tune out the noise, and there's been a lot of noise, like a lot of just, I won't comment on it, but anyway, and I hear some of the narratives and I just want to like cry. But anyway, it is what it is. That's your jobs. But our jobs are to focus on the wins and to focus on, there's a way to win each game, and the players deserve a chance to have that. And so sometimes that can vary, but in a game where, a lot of guys were banged up and they were fully healthy, it's a big win.
So what he's referring to there, I think, is the way that he has built this team. And at times and at times you, because I've heard from you, have not loved some of the additions of the Denver Broncos, especially in the draft. Right? They went for this guy. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they prioritize this? Why didn't they go out and get Jalen Waddle at the trade deadline? Like all of these kind of things. At times, Sean Payton and George Payton have been questioned about, even though overall I think most people can acknowledge they've done a good job of filling out this roster, there have been times where you go, man, why didn't they go there instead of there? But behind all of these moves is that mental aspect that Sean Payton is referring to there. And he loves to bring up this idea about hurricane windows, which we here in Colorado know nothing about. I can't speak to what the heck he's talking about when it comes to hurricane windows, 188, 160. What are these things? I have no idea. But it's been, this whole building process has been incredibly intentional. Right? Because Sean Payton wants to build this team in his own image. He brings in Will Lutz. He brings in Adam Troutman. And yesterday, Adam Troutman is going to the mat for Bo Nix. Basically, remember that viral video a few years ago? The leave Britney alone. That's what Adam Troutman's comments felt to me like. Like, you think Bo Nix is the first athlete to be criticized? And by the way, like everybody's making out to be like some hero because he deleted his social media account. I just thought it got all a little bit much. But that's one of Sean Payton's guys that he had in New Orleans that he brought in to have that mentality. I'm sure there are times, and I think J.K. Dobbins even kind of alluded to it after the Raiders win. Like there was some angst on the offensive side of the ball about how they weren't picking up the defense, that the defense was playing at the level they were playing at all the time, and the offense wasn't. So you can't tell me that quietly there hasn't been some frustration about Bo Nix in this offense. But what J.K. Dobbins said was the closest thing that you'll ever hear anyone's come to criticizing Bo Nix or calling anybody out. They want to do better, and you can read into it and say, at times, do they feel like Bo Nix is capable of more than he's shown? But publicly, they're defending Bo Nix. Right? They're rallying around him. Even though at times Bo Nix absolutely deserves criticism. And that's the business that he has worked his whole life to get into. So he's not walking in blindly here. But the Broncos have perhaps passed on more talented players to find the players with the right makeup. The players that can kind of brush aside the talk about they're fraudulent. They can't keep doing this. And then they just keep doing this. So the culture that Sean Payton has built in Denver is as much to credit for the Broncos winning that game yesterday as the talent on the field. And there is talent on the field, especially on the defensive side of the football. But the culture, the mentality, to the Texter's earlier point, it needs to be credited as much as the compilation of talent that exists on the Denver Broncos team. Now, this game, it very much feels like a watershed moment, right? I mentioned a paradigm shift. Like there are games that every team goes through as they're becoming a contender that you look back and you say, that was the game. That was the game. And for many people, yesterday will be that. Yesterday will be the game where they bought into the Denver Broncos being a Super Bowl contender. Or they'll look at that game and say, that's when the Broncos got that proverbial monkey off their back. Not the game a couple of years ago when Patrick Mahomes, was flu-ridden and played like absolute trash, independent of what the Broncos were doing against him. This one felt different, right, than the last time the Broncos beat the Chiefs, when Patrick Mahomes was actually on the field. But for Sean Payton, I found this interesting. He goes back even further than that to the game that ultimately turned the Denver Broncos in this direction and turned them into the team that you are seeing now pick up its biggest win since they won the Super Bowl. Listen to Sean Payton's words.
I think that loss in Kansas City was where the 189 miles per hour was tested. And that was a tough, gut-wrenching loss. But I think there was a feeling, and if you look at our record from that loss, there was a feeling that, we belong here.
So he's going back to when, if you recall, that's when the kick was blocked at the end of the game in Kansas City. After that, the Broncos went 4 straight wins, 4-2, 5-2. They lost in the playoffs, which is a different animal, but 5-2, 6-2 with Tennessee, 6-4, and then here's the win streak. So 14-4. The Broncos have been in the regular season since Will Lutz's kick was blocked at Arrowhead. That's when Sean Payton is saying the belief turned. Now, but that's internally. Right? And why I keep going back to the fact that the Broncos needed that game. They didn't need it for playoff positioning, but they needed it for that belief that they have to be rewarded, to be kind of boosted and say, okay, we've been believing in this, but now here's a game. Here's a game that we can point to and say, we were right to be confident. Philadelphia is another one. And the problem is you don't get many of them. Right? That's why the Broncos, not for the same reasons that Kansas City need yesterday's game, but they did need yesterday's game. To show them that their confidence in themselves is not misplaced. Every so often you need that whatever it is to kind of show you like, oh yeah, this is why we're confident. Or we have good reason to be confident. Look at the team we just beat. But Sean Payton saying that belief that the Broncos have had actually was born out of a loss rather than a win. But for people on the outside, certainly, yesterday's going to be that game for them, to where they go, all right, yeah, the Broncos, they're a thing. They're real. 719-24-7, 1313. One other thing I want to bring you from Sean Payton, because let's not forget that the defense, once again, kept the Denver Broncos in that game for 3 quarters so they could do that fourth quarter thing that they always seem to do. How was it possible against Patrick Mahomes, who had his entire offensive line, all of his skill players, and they still were able to hold him down? Here's Sean Payton on why.
Look, I think changing the looks with respect to Patrick, man, he's something. Trying to keep him in the pocket and eliminate some of the, the 3rd and 20, he climbs up and, we give up an interference, but rushing him the right way and then playing coverage the right way. It's tough, especially when they're healthy with all their skill players like they were tonight.
And this is where the institutional knowledge comes into play. The fact that they run into this guy twice a year. And Vance Joseph and the Broncos defense as a whole deserves the lion's share of the credit for what transpired yesterday. Because this was a Kansas City Chiefs offense that looked to be like the old Kansas City Chiefs offense. Running game, we don't need no stinking running game. Yeah, well, you kind of did. Against this defense, you did. But they were able to keep Mahomes corralled. Even if they weren't, and they got to him a few times. But even if they weren't able to actually place their hands on Patrick Mahomes, they affected him. And what was the other game that Sean Payton mentioned that? We didn't get to him, but we affected him. I have to go back and look which game that is. It was Dak. It was when they played Dallas. Where Sean Payton said, we didn't get to him, but we affected him. They got to Mahomes more than they got to Dak in that Cowboys game. But I felt the same way, that the Broncos defense, while not putting up the sack numbers that they put up against some of the teams they have played this season, they were affecting Patrick Mahomes and not allowing him to do what he does to so many teams, which is escape, scramble, get first downs. And let's also give credit to the guys on the back end. Oh, by the way, they didn't have Pat Surtain. And I know Riley Moss got called for a couple of his pass interferences. I'm not getting into that. They were both pass interference. But that adds to it. Like, it's not like Riley Moss had that much greater of a day than he normally has. He always has those big pass interference calls. It was very much the same. And that's kind of my bigger point here, is that what the Denver Broncos did yesterday was what they do against everyone. It was just happened to be against a team that not many people believed they could follow that same recipe against. And yet they did. 8 wins in a row for the Denver Broncos. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts next. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on the Broncos slaying the dragon yesterday. That is the Kansas City Chiefs taking a stranglehold upon the AFC West. You can drop me a line, 719-247-1313, as I said, or you could reach out on social media as Sean says, don't get me started with the officiating, but both teams were penalized too much. I would agree. And I said that earlier. I thought the referees inserted themselves in a game they didn't need to insert themselves in too much. They did it too much. I will say that. I don't think that one team was unfairly officiated. I think there's a lot of ticky-tack stuff going on, and that's not what you love to see in a game that big. You want the players to decide it. I do think that the referees backed off as the game wore on, which was good. But, yeah, there was a stretch there where and my son, who was watching the game with me, says, I'm not enjoying this game. And said because referees were making too many calls. Now, the penalty yardage was about the same, but more penalties were called on the Chiefs. It was just Riley Moss accounted for so many penalty yards by himself. But I agree with that sentiment. There were times where the referees just needed to kind of, do you got to call this? Can you just let him play? Like the Juwan Taylor lining up next to Patrick Mahomes, like you got to call that. They got to teach Juwan Taylor a lesson. Call him for everything. But, yeah, too many penalties early in that game. But I thought that the referees kind of backed out of things. And also, Sean Payton, watch out for that referee. Could you imagine if that ultimately was, like, flip the game? The penalty where Sean Payton took out a ref? Oh, boy. That would be quite the conversation, but didn't turn the game. Broncos still persevered through Sean Payton taking out an official. Your thoughts at 719-247-1313. This from the 719. Come on, Kaufman, don't be so cynical. Even I got to give some snaps to the Bronx. They got a marginal dub against a marginal Swiftie team. Good for them. I don't know where you're going with that. I'm not being cynical. I would say my tone in today's show has been anything but cynical. I was cynical about the Denver Broncos going into that game. Not as cynical about them coming out of it. And neither the Broncos nor the Kansas City Chiefs are marginal. I think they're both good teams. So, I'm not being cynical. Brett says the Chiefs have an easy schedule. They will get into the playoffs. I'm not going to talk too much crap yet. Says and then he chases it with given the Kansas City Chiefs' current position and their potential high draft pick, which quarterback do you see them drafting in the 2026 draft? Yeah, you had a momentary breaking of your character there, Brett, but you came back with it. You recovered. There is a Chiefs side of this. I'll get into it briefly here. The Chiefs season is Sunday. I think the Chiefs are a good team. I think they're a playoff caliber team. I think they are still a team that you could see going to the Super Bowl. But they are running out of time. And I think yesterday's game was a big blow to their chances. This Sunday's game is everything. If they don't beat Indy, I don't think they make the playoffs. I think they have to beat Indianapolis. And look, if that gives us round 3, between Kansas City and Denver, yes, Kansas City could beat the Denver Broncos. But the way that they need to beat the Denver Broncos is by making them, Bo Nix, play for 4 quarters instead of just 1. You got to punish the Denver Broncos for their, and yesterday wasn't perfect. Where's RJ Harvey? That, to me, moving forward is a big emphasis, should be a big emphasis on with the Broncos. You got to get RJ Harvey working here. He's got to be, with J.K. Dobbins now being out for the season, you've got to get RJ Harvey up to speed. You got to get him the reps. And maybe in retrospect, Sunday wasn't the time to do it because it would be a big stage for RJ Harvey to step onto, and you gave the ball to Jaleel McLaughlin. But let's be honest, the Broncos running game, it was effective at times. I don't know that the ratio was where it ideally would be. And that's why I said through 3 quarters or the whole game, it was the same blueprint from the Denver Broncos because I think that they failed to impress on the offensive side of the football for 3 quarters. I think it's got to be an emphasis of this team these last handful of weeks to get RJ Harvey up to speed to where they can depend on him to fill the role. And maybe he's not going to be as good as J.K. Dobbins, but you got to get him as close to that as you possibly can. But yeah, maybe we get round 3. And we still don't even have round 2. We don't know what everybody's going to look like. I mean, the Broncos, it might be the reverse of what last year's Kansas City-Denver game might be. I don't know if Denver would rest everybody like Kansas City did week 18 of last year, but the Broncos could go into Arrowhead on Christmas with kind of everything buttoned up, except maybe the first seed. Maybe we see him in the playoffs. In Kansas City, the blueprint is there, but yesterday they couldn't do it. So we'll see if they do it on Christmas, and then we'll make our determination. I'm not taking the Denver Broncos to win the Super Bowl today. I'm just saying they need to. It's like Joe Bluth with the Society of Magicians, that sign that in the picture, we demand to be taken seriously. Like the Broncos are that, except they deserve to be taken seriously. They've been demanding for a while, and it was like, okay, like, I don't know. Yesterday's performance demands that they be taken seriously. But the playoffs are a different animal, right? This team is going to go into the playoffs still quite inexperienced. They'll just have 1 game under their belt, and they might meet up with Josh Allen. They might meet up with Lamar. They might meet up with Aaron Rodgers. They might meet up with Patrick Mahomes. Like that's a different thing. But they should be taken seriously. This from the 719. I've never seen such man crushes on the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs other than Tony Romo and Chris Collinsworth. But there is that. I'll say that, but and I don't know what fandom you are. I could see from some of your previous texts. Like, let's take Nikola Jokic. I'm not trying to throw this back. I'm just saying, I think you have to acknowledge to some degree that the reason why people around here are so tired of Collinsworth and Romo loving all over Patrick Mahomes is because of the uniform he wears. Right? It would be a little bit more okay if Patrick Mahomes were the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Right? It's because he plays for Kansas City. It's because Kansas City has been what they've been for the last, 8 years. I get it. I understand it. I at times think that people around here are a little bit too effusive with their praise of Bo Nix. Yeah, I got to admit, Patrick Mahomes, pretty special quarterback. Pretty talented guy. But, to be fair to Tony Romo, if that love affair with Patrick Mahomes is construed as playing favorites, I mean, Tony Romo went berserker on that illegal contact penalty that took away the pick six from Jahdae Barron. So maybe they love on Mahomes. Maybe they love on Mahomes too much. But Tony Romo was on the Broncos' side 100% with the illegal contact that wiped away the Jahdae Barron pick six. This from the 316. You are right to be cynical now. The Broncos scored one touchdown and won. Not many fan bases would take this type of victory lap with that offensive performance. And I get where you're coming from, but they do this every week. Like, what is the point? And I'll open this up to you or anybody else who wants to chime in. How many games do they have to do this for before you just say, and I started the show off by saying it's ugly. It's not the way I would want my favorite football team to play for 4 quarters. It's not aesthetically pleasing. It does lead to people being cynical. I think rightly so. You got to look at the way that the Broncos play in some of these games and go, yeah, they're not great. But how many games? Who else do they have to beat? Like, that's where I'm at. And I've been cynical about this team. I've given them their flowers when they beat Philadelphia. I was quite effusive with my praise. But the game right before Kansas City, you look like absolute garbage against the Vegas Raiders. Like, I think people were right to be cynical. The way you play, the way you win, invites that cynicism. But after a game like yesterday where we were all saying, yeah, you keep doing it against these teams, you're not going to do it against Kansas City. And they did. So the question that I legitimately have is, how many more games in a row do they have to win like this before you go, this is just how they win? Who else in the league do they have to beat this way? And again, I'm not saying that I'm taking them to win the Super Bowl. But should they be in that conversation? Yes. Yes. The two teams that represented the NFL in the Super Bowl, that played in the Super Bowl last year, the Broncos beat them the exact same way, both of those teams. At some point, you don't have to, fall head over heels for them or start, raising the banner now or booking your tickets for a Broncos Super Bowl or planning the parade or anything. Still a ways to go, and we still have not seen this team pull through in the playoffs. And we've done this with the Avalanche, and we've done this with the Nuggets. Like, you can have a terrific regular season and get bounced early in the playoffs. We've seen it with the two teams that are champions. So I suppose there's still a level of cynicism that the Broncos should be met with as a team that has not proven themselves in the postseason yet. But we're still how many weeks away from the playoffs? How many more teams do they have to beat this way before we just say, as annoying as the way they play is, it's effective and they keep doing it. They can replicate it week in and week out. Against the best teams in the league, against the worst teams in the league. This is who they are. This is from Ben. One thing I will tell you is Patrick Mahomes is not used to getting hit like that. They were pounding him. I would agree that one, and credit to Mahomes, that's what you got to do. Remember when he got sandwiched between two Broncos? It might have been Benito and Cooper. But, like, he got hit hard. Yeah, the Broncos, that's the other thing I will say. They didn't get to him all the time. They didn't get to him constantly, but I think they affected him even when they weren't able to ultimately bring him down. And then when they did get a hit on him, they made it count. Ben adds, the Broncos have a better defense than I thought they did. They can get after it, but as we see, the key to beating the Chiefs is putting pressure on Patrick Mahomes, which they did on every play. They did, and yet there were still times in the game, and there was still, right, that Travis Kelce touchdown. When Travis Kelce scored a touchdown, how many people were like, oh, here we go? Even with as good as the Broncos defense had played to that point, the Chiefs in crunch time still found a way to get Travis Kelce into the end zone, which, by the way, gave him the all-time touchdown record for the Chiefs. Nobody's talking about that today, are they? Let me break real quick. We'll come back. If you have a text, I'll get to it right after this break here on Extra Sports 1300. Our coverage of Monday Night Football coming up at the top of the hour. So let's get to some of your remaining text messages. Albert says Broncos have a lot of growing to do, but they keep taking steps. Mahomes and the Chiefs were in playoff mode on Sunday. Absolutely. And I said this going into the game. One thing that this is not one of those games like I mentioned a couple years ago when they actually snapped their losing streak to the Chiefs, how Patrick Mahomes was flu-ridden and just made some god-awful decisions. And, look, there was none of that going into this game. The Chiefs were healthy. They were healthier than they had even been in previous weeks because they got back Juwan Taylor. They got back Josh Simmons, who wasn't a health thing. It was a personal matter. But the Chiefs had everybody except Pacheco. Okay. Broncos were without Singleton, without Surtain, without J.K. Dobbins. The Chiefs needed that game more than the Broncos for the standings. And the Chiefs were coming in rolling and coming off of a bye in which a situation in which Andy Reid rarely, if ever, loses. That game set up for whoever wins, they deserve their credit, especially the Denver Broncos. But the symmetry between the way they lost the real game against Kansas City last year, not that week 18, whatever that was, the real matchup against the Chiefs last year, for them to basically win yesterday in the very way that they lost, that one in itself shows growth. In itself shows how far this team has gone. This from the 719, the 2014, this is B-Van, by the way, in Colorado Springs. The 2014 Broncos, the ones that got spanked by Seattle in the Super Bowl, dominated offensively only to be dominated in the Super Bowl. This year, the Broncos are using the rope-a-dope strategy, hang around until the fourth quarter at the end of the game when there's no chance for a comeback. Is that what Bo Nix is doing? He's rope-a-doping everyone? I think Bo Nix would very much like to produce in the first three quarters, and he has said as much. But here's Bo Nix on the key for the Denver Broncos offensively yesterday, especially, of course, in the fourth quarter.
At times, I felt like today we just had timely third down execution and we had timely plays that were explosive. And against a team like that, finding explosive plays is one of the best ways to get some confidence, get some juice, and have this belief that, you can do it.
Well, and against a very good defense, one of the 3 to 5 best defenses in the NFL. I told you the play that I knew I felt like the Denver Broncos were going to win that football game was when Bo Nix hit Cortland Sutton on the 3rd and 15, right around the 2-minute warning. But to Nix's point, he hit Cortland Sutton on a 21-yard pass on the first drive, which they kicked a field goal. He hit Troy Franklin on a 3rd and 8 for 35 yards to lead to the go-ahead touchdown. Then he hit a 48-yard pass to Pat Bryant on 1st and 10, leading to a field goal in the fourth quarter. So they had those explosive plays that have not been as plentiful as I think Broncos fans would have liked them to be. But they got some of them. And if you're thinking there's another place to go, maybe that's where it is. Has Bo Nix figured some stuff out in terms of being able to deliver the ball accurately downfield? Now, a lot of that showed up late as the game wore on, but we could delve into that subject as we move through the week. This from the Corey from the 719. Love your Ryan, but any Avs talk tonight? It wasn't as big of a win, but man, it was a good game or what? It was. Was Avs with Scott Wedgwood in goal, doing what they keep doing. The way that the Avs play, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than the way that the Broncos do, is another win. I'll tell you the thing that I did not get to today that I would have had yesterday not been as monumental for the Denver Broncos as it was. Are we done now with the Nuggets-Wolves thing? The biggest development, the most important thing that happened this weekend outside of the Denver Broncos was not the Avs. It was what the Nuggets did on Saturday night. I think Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, the two-headed front office of the Denver Nuggets, have addressed and maybe fixed all of the Nuggets issues in one offseason. The non-Jokic minutes are not as big of a problem anymore, which is now making Nikola Jokic even better because he's more rested. Seems like their messages, however coded, to Jamal Murray has gotten through because Jamal Murray looks in tremendous shape and is playing at near an all-star level right now, probably an all-star level. And now they don't lose to the Wolves anymore? They might have cured all of the Nuggets' ills in one offseason, in their first offseason as GMs. Because I watched a Minnesota team throw the kitchen sink at the Denver Nuggets, including trying to bully them. Right? Which is something, to the Wolves' credit and to the Nuggets' detriment, has worked before. That Nuggets team on Saturday night would not be bullied. They pushed back. How about the two of the guys leading that charge were the two new guys in Tim Hardaway and Jonas Valanciunas, bringing that toughness. I mean, I can see the parallels between Saturday's Nuggets win and the Broncos win yesterday, because that was a Minnesota team that the Nuggets, Freudian slip, the Nuggets have had their fair share of problems with, and yet they take them on less than 100%. No Cam Johnson, no Christian Brown. Now, is that as big as the Broncos being without Pat Surtain? No, but they weren't at full strength. Minnesota was. They go into Minnesota. They would not be bullied. And a couple of the guys that were not allowing the Nuggets to be bullied were two guys that Ben Tenzer and John Wallace acquired this offseason in Jonas Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway. Now, I will say this for both of these teams. I think it's fair to say the ultimate way to get over these teams is to beat them in the postseason. And maybe we'll get that with Denver and Kansas City. Maybe we'll get that with the Nuggets and the Wolves. That's when you'll really for sure know that there is a changing of the guard. But man, for all the losing that the Nuggets did in the way that the Nuggets would lose to Minnesota, man, Saturday was big. And by the way, that's the second time that they've beaten the Minnesota Timberwolves this year. And I said it after they beat Minnesota the first time. No Anthony Edwards in that game, but the way Jamal Murray played in that game, because he's the face of the Nuggets' struggles against Minnesota. He threw the heat pack. The way he played against Minnesota, gave you the confidence, if you're a Nuggets fan, that even with Anthony Edwards, this Nuggets team could beat them, but you needed to see it. Right? Same with the Broncos. The way they've been playing maybe gave you confidence they could beat Kansas City, but you needed to see it. And with Anthony Edwards and everybody else of note with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Nuggets beat them. So that, to me, with all due respect to the Avs, who just keep plugging away, that was the most consequential non-Broncos thing that happened this weekend. Was the Nuggets beating Minnesota and the realization that Ben Tenzer and John Wallace may have cured all of the Nuggets' ills in one offseason. Jamal Murray, non-Jokic minutes, and the Minnesota Timberwolves don't seem as much of a problem this year as they have been in years past. We can get more into the Nuggets tomorrow. Obviously, they play tonight against the Chicago Bulls. We'll get into the Avs, but today, deservingly so, was about the Denver Broncos. And we'll continue this conversation more forward-looking as far as this Denver Broncos team is concerned tomorrow and beyond. In the meantime, I appreciate your patronage. Catch me on KKTV coming up this evening for more of Corey giving me a hard time and me saying that the Broncos have changed the perspective, shifted the paradigm. The question now is not, can the Broncos play a 4-quarter game? It's what teams in the NFL can make the Broncos play a 4-quarter game, force them to play a 4-quarter game. Kansas City Chiefs did it yesterday. The way the Broncos have won in the previous 7 games, they did it again yesterday. Appreciate your patronage. Coming up next, Monday Night Football, Cowboys and Raiders. Talk to you tomorrow.